University. Welcome, Stephen. Becky, Donatelli, and I met in the ladies' room, which is how all good meetings begin. So we're now already bonded. She's the founder and president of Campaign Solutions. She's the first person to raise money on the internet for a political campaign. Her company, Campaign Solutions, has raised more online money for Republican candidates and public affairs clients than any other company. And she was the chief internet consultant to the John McCain campaign, raising about $100 million online. Amy Walter. Amy Walter is the new political director at ABC News, and she also provides on-air analysis on ABC News programs. Like Steve, she's a veteran of the National Journal's Hotline and was the senior editor of the Cook Political Report, where she earned a reputation as a top handicapper of political races. So let's hope that she has her crystal ball with her. Amy?
It didn't fit in my pocket, but thanks.
And speaking of spot-on election predictions, of course, Nate Silver is the founder of 538.com, the popular poll analysis site that is now hosted by the New York Times. 538 won the 2008 Weblog Award for Best Political Coverage. And among other things, Nate has been named one of Time Magazine's 100 most influential people and has been called a spreadsheet psychic and a number-crunching prodigy. So, we have a lot to ask you about that. Welcome. So let me start with something that David Axelrod said. He said that there is a kind of group pathology in Washington, which is one of the reasons he looks forward to decamping to Chicago. So you who sort of are covering campaigns or working on campaigns, how do you deal with that group pathology and the way in which what is covered in Washington does not reflect either what is happening or what is being talked about in real America?
Well, I live in New York, and there's no pathology there at all. But, I think it's probably healthy to kind of, get out and have conversations with people who aren't like yourself, I suppose, and that's probably not a lot easier to do in New York than in Washington. But, the kind of joke Ed was making about kind of reading the Daily Kos and stuff, I think it's important to read, whether you're a liberal or conservative, read blogs on all sides of the spectrum. Some of them are very good, some of them are less good, but still give you a sense for the zeitgeist. That seems so essential to me. Watch both Fox News and MSNBC if you want to stereotype them on one side or the other. But, just consume a lot of opinions. And in some ways, it's much easier now because we do have the internet, and you have people maybe who aren't online, who don't have as much of a voice. But in general, you can know what the local paper in Topeka is saying about a House race that you're curious about. And that should make things a lot easier in theory.
I employ the mother-in-law rule, which is if I can't explain it to her, then whichever side is making that argument isn't winning it. And I found that on healthcare. She kept saying, and I will pause it right now, that these are, my in-laws are both Republican-leaning. They live in Texas, also not a place that is known for having, they're not sitting in the middle of some liberal bastion, but at the same time, they're very thoughtful, and they're really just looking for an explanation. Most people in this country, I find, and I do this both talking to them and other family members or other folks who don't do what I do every day or what we all do every day, they don't read the blogs, and they don't watch Fox, and they don't watch MSNBC, and they don't have really strongly held opinions on some of the things that we think are the most important issue going on for Americans. And so if you can't have something break through with them, then the odds are that it doesn't matter if the right is all fired up about it or the left's all fired up. It's not going to really move the regular voters. And that, to me, it just is so much too about common sense. And we forget about that here when we get caught up in some of the details of every teeny bit of legislation.
But in fact, a lot of what is happening right now and dominating the debate is not about common sense. It is a lot of fear-mongering, and we see now the new spate of political ads, and a lot of them are playing on fears, which seems to happen every election cycle. Is it true that still fear is the way to go, fear rather than hope?
It's either love or hate. I mean, as a fundraiser, we know we have to have somebody really fall in love with our candidate or be deathly afraid of the opposition. So it's one or the other, and I'm sure we see it all across the board. Working exclusively on the internet, we think that we have kind of a special seat, and we see first what the trends are. We know if our money goes up, if our signups go up, if the info box is full of people yelling at us. I mean, we are on the first line. And if you go to your new media people, your web people, and ask them the trends that they're seeing today, that's going to be what's dominant a few days from now. Everything goes so fast, too.
Yeah. And you have actually done a really interesting video, which was kind of really innovative, with the Michelle Bachmann campaign. Would you tell us about it?
Well, that's the other thing. Everything changes so fast online. What we're doing today will be passé perhaps a year from now, or what we're doing a year from now we're not even thinking about doing today. But the whole convergence of media is something that we've been talking about for a while, and it is happening. Television sets are computers, are movie theaters, and it's all crossing over. So Google has been an enabler of all of ours to do interesting and cool things. So we did something for Michelle Bachmann's campaign. Her team, Greener and Hook, did some really great ads. They were very funny, all centered on the Minnesota State Fair. And if any of you have ever been to the Minnesota State Fair, it's got the most fried food,
Yes.
fried spaghetti, anyway. So anyway,
fried beer.
Yes, they fry everything. So her team did this ad that said basically Michelle Bachmann's opponent wanted to tax the food at the Minnesota State Fair. And so it was a great ad, very funny, played on TV, blah, blah, blah.
Did he want to tax the food?
That you'd have to fact check the ad.
We don't do fat.
Exactly. But at any rate, so what Google has done with some of their new innovations is they allowed us to draw a circle around the Minnesota State Fair, a geographic circle, and stream ads into the people that are only inside the fairgrounds to their smartphones. And 2,200 people that afternoon watched an ad inside the fairgrounds about her opponent trying to tax their corn dog at the fair. So there are no more boundaries. You know, we're really able to talk and communicate across all kinds of levels.
But is that a problem in terms of what we just talked about for a second, whether this was a factual ad or not? I mean, doesn't that really matter a lot when we have this huge breakdown of trust? You know, the public just doesn't trust anybody at the moment, not the media, not politicians, not Democrats, not Republicans. Aren't we feeding that mistrust? Whether we are in the media or campaign consultants, if we put something out and we don't really care whether it's factual or not?
Well, I'm the only political consultant up here, and I will tell you, all kidding aside, we do work for very honorable people, and we have a standard of ethics that we hew to. We're very involved in our professional trade association. It does have a standard of conduct, and I think it does begin with us to try to tell the truth all the time. So,
what else can the media do, Steve, to
fact
check?
I think one of the upsides of the proliferation of information sources is the fact that you can go to places and find out whether an ad is truthful or not. I mean, you certainly have, whether it's someplace like PolitiFact or whether it's local reporters that have teamed up with national media outlets that are fact-checking these things on an almost real-time basis. So really interested voters and reporters who are just trying to sort of keep up with all of this information can go to different sources and get, I think, in many cases, an authoritative up or down, yes or no, this is true or it's not, scoring of these kinds of ads. And it's one of the reasons I think that having this kind of information technology at your fingertips, whether it's on a smartphone, whether it's whether you're Googling, whatever you're doing, is changing the way that we operate on a minute-by-minute basis.
So you think actually people are going to be less willing to just put something out there and hope it lasts until the election?
Well, it depends, I think, to what extent they get called on it. I mean, I think that they will. I mean, ultimately, as a believer in free markets, I think if you put good information out there that follows bad, if you can identify blatantly misleading political ads, for instance, and call them on it, I think that people will learn that it doesn't pay to run those kind of ads. Maybe I'm hopelessly naive about that. Wouldn't be the first time people have said that about me. But I do believe that. I do believe that if you provide people with good information, you provide them places to get that good information, they will ultimately use it.
Now, Steve, we were talking in the green room about your feeling that the way the Tea Party is portrayed in New York and Washington is a very inaccurate portrayal. So tell us the truth.
I do. Well, I mean, it's interesting. I was struck earlier by what David Axelrod said when he was talking about the Tea Parties. The issue came up, and the first thing that he did was turn to this New Yorker piece about the funding of the Tea Party and the Koch brothers. And to me, it was emblematic, not to criticize him since he's not here to defend himself, but to me it was emblematic of the problem with the way that Washington sees the Tea Party. There's this huge growth of outrage, and in most cases I would say it's voter outrage rather than outright voter anger that's grown in the country. It's, you know, everybody knows it. It's the story of the 2010 election cycle. And yet when you look at the New Yorker, and certainly the New Yorker isn't alone, a lot of people have focused on the funding and the apparatus of the Tea Parties. The story for reporters that are based in Washington and New York is all about, you know, the Koch brothers or these billionaires or how they're raising money or what have you. That's not the story of the Tea Party movement. It's not. The Kochs have been giving money to libertarian causes for 30 years, and they've given money at the same levels for 30 years. The idea that what we're seeing in the country on a grassroots level, which I think is incredibly organic, almost entirely organic, is somehow you know, manipulated by these two brothers throwing money at it from Washington is a total misunderstanding of the way that the Tea Parties have come to be and are operating on a daily basis.
But Amy, in fact, it's not just the Tea Parties who are angry. I have the sense, as I've been traveling around the country, that everybody is angry.
Right.
It's just that people express it differently. How else do you see people expressing it?
They hate everybody. I mean, any institution right now is viewed skeptically, and that's what makes it so hard with these attack ads. I mean, we saw this in 2006. Republicans said, well, we're gonna hold the House this year because we're gonna run these attack ads just ripping the face off of all of these Democrats. We got so much stuff there, we can't wait to start. And they did, and it didn't work because people didn't buy it. And they were already so frustrated with the status quo that really, unless you said, this person is cloning aliens in their basement that are gonna come out and take over the earth, and we have pictures of those people, and even then, it might not have worked.
What's next week's Bill Maher clip?
That's true. That could be going on HBO next week. That wasn't going to work either. And so we're now seeing some of that coming back to Democrats, right? We're going to run these campaigns. We're going to give people a choice. It's going to be negative, and people aren't buying it. And partly it's because there's a lack of trust of any of the messengers, right? So if you don't trust the messenger, you're not going to trust the message. Mm-hmm. And then I started talking to consultants about, well, who would be a good third-party messenger now, right? So remember, there's a time you would want Tiger Woods in your ads. Probably not now. It's a time you would want, you know, I'm a successful CEO. Maybe not. Hey, I made a lot of money on Wall Street. Nope, don't want you either. Thanks. I've used this example a lot, but I think, and we're starting to see some candidates do this, but believe it or not, a humility angle could work a little bit, as well as an acknowledgement that things are broken and I get it. And so I thought it was last year, Domino's did those ads. Did you guys see those that were really smart? It started off with people in a focus group saying, this pizza's terrible, the sauce stinks, the crust stinks. And I thought, okay, then I'm gonna see the Papa John's guy jump up and go, see, we did all these focus groups. And instead the Domino's guy comes up and he's like, yeah. He said, basically, we suck, we know we did, and we're sorry, and we're gonna make it better. So we're going to go out, and then we're going to bring you guys back, and we're going to give you our pizza, and we're going to win you back over because we admit we screwed up. And that kind of acknowledgement is what voters have been looking for. The problem is now that every single person who's associated at all with politics is viewed so skeptically that I don't think it can break through today.
This is an interesting point because I don't know if you saw the story yesterday about the candidates who've had financial problems and their homes have been foreclosed, etc., and yet the public is looking at them sympathetically, maybe because they feel, oh, at least they get it.
Right.
So is that what we're really maybe in for? Now you want candidates who've suffered themselves so that the public can identify with them.
I don't know that the public is focusing on this. I mean, I agree to Stephen's point that most folks haven't really keyed in on who these people are, and they're just awash in all of these ads. So I don't know if it's that part's part of it, why it's not resonating. But there's always that piece in American politics. You want somebody who can relate to you. And if you are in Washington, whether you've been here for 20 years or 20 minutes, voters are just apt to tune you out.
But then, Nate, does that mean that we are in for continual electoral reversals? Like whoever is in power is going to be the next target of all the anger at the fact that government is not working and solutions coming out of Washington are not working, and then the next guys are going to seize power. Is this like what we're in for?
I think that's probably the most
Yes.
likely scenario. I mean, if you look at recessions following major fiscal crises, they have long-term effects. 3, 5, 7 years. It's going to be a long time before unemployment gets down to 6.5%
How
or
long?
5.5%. I'm not an economist, or that's
But
my
you're
degree.
a predictor.
I was an optimist about the economy for a while, but it seems like and also one thing about unemployment too is that it doesn't always go down to 4%. Different kind of troughs. Sometimes you only get down to 6.5%, and that's as good as you do in expansion. But there are enough problems with the deficit and the environment and the various kind of foreign entanglements we have. I mean, I don't want to talk too much about, is this kind of the beginning of the end of American hegemony? But these are questions our generation might have to face, and it's not going to be as easy to be an American president. I'm sure in our lifetimes we'll have another couple of great presidents, but there'll be also a lot of presidents who have very difficult times, I would think, and majority leaders certainly, and congressmen and senators who have even more difficult times. It's almost like a game of kind of reverse musical chairs. At some point, the economy will improve, and whoever kind of happens to be in power then will benefit from it. But Republicans in 2011, let's say they come in with a 7-seat majority in the House. That the Senate's kind of decided by Joe Lieberman anyway, and they normally don't have a majority, but no one can get anything done, and unemployment's still slow, and they're having infighting within their party. I mean, that's not a great situation for them. Exactly when people expect them to, repeal health care, some of their voters will, and Obama has the veto pen, and so they could get themselves in a lot of trouble by 2012. But it's good for me, right? If you like messy, complicated, hard to predict campaigns, we should have several of those, I think. But I don't think we're going to have some resolution unless, who knows? I mean, like Amy, I've been thinking about third-party alternatives a little bit. I think if you have maybe a Ross Perot type figure in the 2012 election, it could be interesting, and maybe someone can come in and say, look, both parties have such damaged brands that I'm the one who actually has credibility on the deficit, for example, or on energy issues. So we'll see. It should be interesting.
But it's not just that it's not going to be good for the politicians, it's going to be really bad for the country. So given that the scenario that you put forward is really going to be very dangerous for the country, what are the alternatives? Like, where do you see the possibilities for actually turning things around?
Can I challenge your
Yes.
assumption? Why do you think it's going to
No,
be bad for the
challenging
country?
Nate's assumption.
Well, why do you collectively think it's going to be bad for the country?
Well,
I guess
only
I think
because
this
if
is what
you-
politics
if we
is
don't
about.
even
I just
know-
think we have some long-term structural problems. The debt, the environment, and if politics behaves as it has in the last couple of cycles, then we're not certain to survive those intact. As powerful as America is right now, and if you have some big debt kind of default issue, I mean, I think it's a real risk in the next 20 years or so.
Also, quite simply, if unemployment stays at the levels that it's at now for a long time. Wouldn't you say that's very bad?
No,
for
certainly.
the
I
country?
guess I misunderstood you as saying this change back and forth between
Oh, no,
political
no,
fighting
just
or political parties, that kind of
the
fighting. I
economic
think that's great
realities,
for the
yeah.
country. And I think, in fact, the more intense that kind of fighting, I think it's much more likely to surface the kind of issues that you're talking about, where we can have an adult conversation about
but
entitlement
see,
reform and
I
things
wish
of that
we could,
nature.
But do you really think that's going to happen? I mean, I just keep hoping, and again, maybe I'm like you and naive, but that in a major crisis like we're in right now, that's when leaders lead, right? It's really easy to be in politics when we're flush and when we're not at war. But this should have been the time. This should have been a time when we saw people stand up and just say, we're going to work together, and next year too. Like, we're really going to talk about entitlement reform. You want to do it?
But
Let's
look,
go.
I would argue that we're seeing some of that. Now, we may not agree on the ideas or the outcome of these ideas, but I would say that when you have somebody like a Paul Ryan who's making a campaign, for better or worse, you can disagree with his policy prescriptions, but he's saying, this is what we need to do, this will work, CBO scored it, here's where we need to be, and let's have an argument
But
about
even
it.
Republicans
And
won't go along. I mean, that's what I'm
No,
saying.
I
It's like
think- I think
even
you're
his
right.
own
I think
party is pushing back on him.
Some of them, I think, but you're also seeing this on early presidential discussions with Mitch Daniels, who's asked point blank, what do we do about this? He said, well, one of the things we need to do is consider raising the retirement age on Social Security. It's the first time you've heard. I mean, look, I'm not getting overly excited that we're going to all have this great debate about entitlements in the next 6 weeks or the next 2 years. But to me, it's one of the first times in recent memory that you've heard people addressing this in a sort of head-on way.
Well, let's take a question.
We are
from-
having a dialogue. That's just it. The whole Tea Party movement, that's what that's about. I mean, there are fringe elements to everything, but most of those people are just concerned about taxes being too high, government not working. They want to talk about issues. They want to explore things instead of just have two bland candidates with greater lousy TV campaigns to choose from. I'm excited about what's
So
going
what
on.
happens if it doesn't work?
What do you mean it doesn't work?
In that-
Dialogue is good. It leads.
No. If they come here and all those
Then they will go again.
Perspectives
And
don't.
people in America want change. They thought they voted for it in 2008. They think they are voting for it in 2010. And if whoever wins doesn't come here and change the way they do business, they will be gone
agree.
until we elect people who will make things change.
But I think what you said now, which is change the way they do business, change the way Washington works, is very different than the specific prescriptions about taxes or the size of government. I mean, this is a different debate. The debate, I think, that the country really wants to have is how broken Washington is. People saw that. Even in these last 2 years, despite the fact that the Obama administration came in wanting to change things. But if you look at the polls, and I'd love to know what you think, Nate, I don't think that the anger is about the size of government. It's about how incompetent government has been. I mean, if you scratch the surface, it's about the bailout and the fact that we bailed out Wall Street and Main Street is still suffering.
Well, something like the Wall Street bailout was not going to be one of the more popular policies in American history, where people don't see the upside, right? I'm someone who thinks that if you go talk to a lot of economists, not all by any means, but they say, look, if we hadn't done this, our hand was forced, and we could have had 20% unemployment now. And in some sense, it makes me a little bit more understanding of kind of the Bush argument about having prevented another kind of terrorist attack. It's kind of the same thing, where people kind of see failure, they don't see the prevention of a worse outcome sometimes. I mean, there are a lot of things that align badly for this White House. I think they've also made a lot of mistakes, frankly, too. But people are, I don't know. I mean, people, when they're unhappy, they tend to be unhappy about everything, right? So if healthcare happens to be on the docket, or cap and trade, or the size of government, right? I'm not really sure that we're seeing some kind of Jeffersonian uprising independent from the strain the economy has put the nation under for quite a while now, and it's been a tough decade going back to 9/11. It's been a tough kind of time for this country, especially after the kind of
Well, let's
the
quickly
90s.
go to a question from the Google moderator. It's a question from Robert in Lincoln, Massachusetts. Why is it that Democrats have a brain but no spine, and Republicans have all spine but no brain? When will the American people get a political party that represents thoughtful and courageous human beings?
It's really from Dorothy. that is writing in from the. Yes.
So who is dying to answer this?
Oh, I think we have brains and a spine.
There we go.
Would you give us an example?
Me, no.
I think it's sort of simplistic. I don't know that vote. I want to
Challenge the question?
No, I think he's right. That's the way that he's right in the sense that that's how he views these two parties and how they set up. And Nate's point about third parties and you would think now would be the time where more and more people are going to start thinking this way and move outside. I mean, we're seeing more people now who are identifying themselves as independents. 37% in the last Pew poll identified themselves as independent voters. So that's a very, that's clearly a sign that more people are feeling this way. I also want to go back to the point about, how people view government. And I think what you have in this country, and we've seen this Allstate National Journal poll, basically found this as well, which is you have a third of people in this country who say government's the problem, not the solution. A third of people in this country who say we need more active government. And then another third, and these are those classic independents who say I want government to have a role, but I just don't trust that they're doing it effectively. Mm-hmm. And that's really the sort of the heart of where we really need to be going when we're talking about how politicians need to address this stuff, to talk to those people who really do want to see something moving beyond just right and left politics.
And in fact, isn't the way that the media present everything as right versus left counterproductive at some point? I mean, I'm constantly amazed by, let's say, the debate around Afghanistan. There are so many conservatives who oppose what's happening in Afghanistan. George Will, Pat Buchanan, Joe Scarborough, Tony Blankley, not to mention the Cato Institute. So this is not exactly the standard left-right debate. And yet the media reflexively present it that way.
But they're all I would argue that they're all part of the media, and they have platforms to make their case. I mean, George Will's made his case persuasively, I think. I mean, I don't find him persuasive, but he's made a very strong case in the pages of the Washington Post and in the platform that he has on ABC. So, I mean, I think to a certain extent, they do have their case. But I understand as a sort of your broader point, particularly with respect to day-to-day politics, is certainly true, and I think it's a function of our two-party system. Now, things could change if we see the emergence of a serious third-party candidate. It won't feel as comfortable to sort of have these right-left assumptions that guide the thinking on these issues. But basically, I think our day-to-day politics are run by those kind of basic assumptions.
But don't you think it makes it harder to have these larger debates? Like right now, the larger debate about redefining capitalism, what's a functioning capitalist system? You have many capitalists who sleep with a copy of Ayn Rand's Fountainhead under their pillow, who are upset by the bailout because they felt that, you bailed out companies that took excessive risk and then the taxpayers on the hook. It didn't seem to make good free enterprise economic sense. And yet it's impossible to have that debate because it's all again left and right. I mean, do you find that at ABC when you read stuff and it's all the left says that, the right says that? Or you never do it?
Of course, I would never do that. And we set up that brilliantly, right, looking for the nuance. But I do think that, but bottom line, you had a lot of Democrats and Republicans vote for the bailout. And in the middle of a presidential campaign, that's still pretty powerful stuff. And so that's, in some ways it's worrisome because what it says is you literally have to get to that cliff before you're going to get both sides to hold hands. And maybe sometimes, in this case, hold hands and then jump, and many of those people aren't coming back to Congress, partly because of that vote. But it also seems to be a truly American thing to sort of wait until it gets really, really bad. In some ways, this goes to the strait of American optimism because we assume it will never really get that bad. It's going to always get better because it does. We always come out of these things, so we don't have to do these crazy things that they do in Europe and other places because we know that we can pull ourselves out. It's only when we see the cliff that we will do something about it.
Well, let's go to one more question from pgun01. Are sites like WikiLeaks and Twitter the future of news? how will the editorial, fact-checking, and fairness roles, responsibility of news be met by this new media?
Oh, you want me to start? Well, obviously, it's hard to give a lot of information in 140 characters, but the fact of the matter is that's how we're talking to people these days. So the whole fairness or fact-checking, you know, when blogs started and bloggers started, they were very good at policing themselves and making sure that they were checking their facts and checking each other. I think we've fallen out of that a little bit with there just being so much information, but hopefully we go back to that self-policing. But in essence, there's so much media out there that people are customizing what they get and how they get it and when they get it and filtering the content that they want to receive. There was a larger discussion earlier about people, the president talking about looking at other sides of the issue, and while I personally think that's a good idea too, the fact of the matter is that people are looking for either what interests them or mirrors what they believe and pulling in this information rather than going other places where it is served to them.
But how do you see the preponderance of social media in this campaign cycle, Facebook, Twitter? How do you see it affecting the midterms? I mean, we saw, for example, how masterfully Sarah Palin is using Facebook. I mean, she can bypass all the mainstream media because she can get all her messages, whether it's about a death panel or anything else, you know, on Facebook.
But I think that Becca makes a great point, which is the filtering piece of it. Right. And so when you're in an era where you're not trusting any institution to tell you the truth, then you really are looking to those people you trust the most, which usually are your friends or your family or people that you've somehow attached onto as saying, you know, this person is trustworthy. And so I get for work purposes, I have a Twitter feed that is very narrow. I don't have a ton of people on there, but there's people that I know that I trust what they're writing. I trust what they're saying. And if they do have an agenda, I know what it is, and they're very upfront about what it is. And that's how I'm going to get all of my information. But you're totally right. I'm not going out to get it anymore. Right. I look at that's the real change is instead of I used to open my computer and go right to the papers, now I open my computer and go right to Twitter. And that's where I'm getting most of my news first thing in the morning.
Well, there's some data that, you know, with respect to TV news, that Fox News' audience is becoming more and more Republican. You know, it's kind of a 4-to-1 ratio when it was a 2.5-to-1 ratio just a few years ago. And that strikes me as dangerous when, you know, I'm not saying people shouldn't have the right. I'm not saying any fairness doctrine, people should consume whatever media they want, right? But if people only hear the news presented to them the way they want it, I think it's, you know, I don't know. I mean, you can't force people to kind of eat their spinach or read their kind of broadsheet newspaper. But, you know, being part of a community, I think we should not lose sight of our real communities, which are probably more diverse than our virtual communities in 99% of all cases, I would think.
And what can we do, you think, to strengthen our real communities then? Because, you know, this is a problem. It's like if I find that what's happening online is strengthening real communities too. There's an enormous amount of self-organizing.
Well, and how many times have you been twittering or forwarding something to somebody who's sitting in the same room with you? Because that's happened multiple times with me, you know.
You're leading a very interesting life.
Very, very bizarre life. I'm an avatar, right. You know, what's bad about that? I like to stay out of reality.
But if you go online, you see, for example, sites like recessionwire.com, howIgotLaidOff.com, and then solution-based sites, Project Bounce Back. You know, it's just amazing how much is going on. And that is about solutions, that is about bearing witness or sharing stories of struggle online that does not get into the mainstream media.
But that doesn't mean people aren't reading it.
Oh, no, absolutely.
Because they are consuming that. They're just doing it in a different path than
and
they
not in large
been.
enough numbers to make a difference to the real communities that NATO is talking
I think
about.
it's actually better because if you think about it in the sort of olden days, you know, the place where you're getting advice or information from was basically people that you could physically see in a day. Now you get a chance to go out and get opinions and information from a gajillion people. Now some of it may be totally bunk, but what were the odds that your next door neighbor knew a lot about medicine, right? Oh, I have a cure for that. Really? Have you gone to medical school? I don't know.
No, I actually completely agree with that. I feel very optimistic about what's happening online around solutions. And the reason I raise the point is because I feel if the mainstream media, including big sites, I mean, we're trying to do a better job of that, covered them more, then others would learn about them. So it's more of how we cover what people are doing around creating their own sites or using Facebook and Twitter. It's really what Bill Stone calls as the next stage. You know, Twitter has been started as something that was fun, life mapping, where you're eating, what you're doing. And its role during the Iran uprising showed us how incredibly important it would be as an instrument of democracy. And now Bill says, calls Twitter not a triumph of technology, but a triumph of humanity. And that's still aspirational, but it shows how it can help connect people. I mean, are you seeing that at all? And do you have any examples of how Twitter, Facebook, social media are being used in ways that are really positive, that are countervailing forces to all the forces of division and scapegoating that we're seeing?
I think there are as many good things happening within social media and with the way people are using the internet as bad things. With everything in life, I think we tend to hear more about the sensational, crazy things that are going on than the everyday, just connections between people. And it is virtual, and two people might be in the same room, but they're still connecting, and they're talking to each other, and they're sharing opinions. And I think I have a lot more interaction with people, frankly, since the advent of Facebook than I did before. So I see this all as a positive. Being a little bit older, I do get concerned on occasion how much information people share about themselves, but that's become the cultural norm. So, you know, that's just the way it is.
So let's take one more question from the Google moderator, from Bill in Texas. In view of the Supreme Court ruling in Citizens United, what is there to prevent foreign governments and international corporations routing money through U.S. corporations which are either majority owned by or a subsidiary of a foreign parent?
I think we had to have Ben Ginsberg come up and answer that question.
Ben, would you like to answer that question?
No.
I-
The truth is, there are laws that stop that. There have always been laws that stop
Right.
it. And there's no difference before or after Citizens United.
Would you like to channel him? Would you like to channel Ben Ginsberg?
I think Ben said it's okay. Everything's going to be all right. We're going to prevent against this.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was talking to someone the other day who is a nonpartisan academic who studies campaign finance reform, who had a very good point about this, because I said, you know, are we seeing this flood of Republican fundraising into third-party groups? Can we say that it's really, there's a cause and effect between the Citizens United ruling and how much money they're raising? Because to me, it seems as if it's really generated by the enthusiasm that's out there for Republicans versus the lack of enthusiasm for Democrats. And that was his point as well, which was, you know, I think a lot of what you're seeing out there is more about enthusiasm. It's more about the fact you have a lot of people with money who want to affect the elections, just as you had a lot of people with money in 2008 who were Democrats who saw themselves as impacting the elections. In fact, you know, Republicans have always complained that their folks are much less successful in doing third-party groups than Democrats. You know, they always sort of look to groups like ACT in 2004 or some of the other and the labor groups as much better funded, smarter than the Republican groups. And now you're seeing more Republican groups sprout up. And part of it is when you get a chance to, one, flip control of the House and the Senate. That tends to get money into your coffers. And the second is to learn a lot of the lessons from those groups that had already started doing it.
And as a fundraiser, I will tell you that most of the money is not coming in from large donors, which is what you tend to see a little bit more on the left. This is truly a grassroots uprising. You know, there are people with their contributions of $10, $15, $25. There's just a lot of them. So we're feeling it from the grassroots.
Now, you're also doing Carly Fiorina's campaign. Are you finding that even for a very wealthy candidate, you are able to get small donations?
Absolutely. She has such massive appeal across the board. And I mean, the average donation online for Carly's campaign is less than $100. I mean, these are per donation. These are regular, everyday people who are massing to give to her. And I'll tell you, we sense the health of a campaign by looking at who's giving and how much they're giving. And Carly is just taking off. People are really focused on that race, and we are thrilled with the response that she's getting.
So how much has she raised online?
I'm not allowed to say that, but they'll report it, I think, in a couple weeks. A lot, let's put it that way. Very, very, very healthy.
You can't just give us an off-the-record
No.
Say
number.
like more
We
than
won't tell anybody.
No.
right. More or less than $1 million.
People like her.
No, we're not questioning that. We're just asking how much is raised. Okay, we'll find out. Now, Steve, you just did a major piece on Senator John Thune and the fact that he may very well be a presidential candidate in 2012. What is the impact that all the different people who are likely presidential candidates on the Republican side, what's the impact that they're going to have in the midterms?
Well, I think you've seen them out and about in the country trying to raise money for Republicans in 2010. There's been sort of an interesting delay. Jonathan Martin, I think, at Politico had a piece about this a couple weeks ago, and it's reflected in conversations that I've had with political types in Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, who say that the sort of on-the-ground activity that they're seeing is at a much slower rate today than it has been in corresponding times in the past. And I think on the Republican side, that's largely due to the fact that major candidates or would-be candidates don't want to be seen out there sort of pumping up themselves when they really want to be seen as raising money and doing things for the party. The focus, they think, should be on 2010, not on 2012. So I think you've seen people sort of pull back and not be quite as active as they have been at this time in different cycles in the past.
Although, of course, Sarah Palin's endorsements made already a big difference in the primaries.
But that I think feeds that broader perception that she's helping. You know, she's helping these candidates. She's giving them. I mean, there's a raging debate, I think, on the right about how much influence she's had and has it really meant, has it really led to elections of people. I think basically what she's done in some cases is take people who weren't as well known and make them well known. She endorses somebody and a candidate who nobody has heard of or few people have paid attention, particularly in the national media. Up to that point, have to stop and say, well, wow, that person's interesting. What are the polls telling us? Have there been polls? And where do we go from here? She's got, I think, an uneven record. Brian Murphy lost in Maryland, who was a Sarah Palin endorsed candidate, and Christine O'Donnell won surprisingly in Delaware. So I think you've seen her try to do, if she, who knows if she's actually going to run, try to feed this perception that what she's out there doing now is making herself busy, helping elect Republicans in 2010. And I think other candidates have done the same with probably not as much fanfare and coverage.
So as we're wrapping up, any concluding comments from any of you? Any big thoughts you have not yet shared? Nate, your predictions.
Well, I mean, I think
How many did you say?
Well, I guess
How
my
many?
big thing, I think this election's a little bit less in the bag for Republicans than people are assuming on the House side, for example. I mean, I think, they have cases where they'll win 60 or 70 seats. That's like totally on the table. But, the campaign's still just taking place in local districts. Some local districts have fairly good polling for Democrats. Some have terrible polling for Democrats. But you're getting somewhat more ambiguous messages. If the Democrats can narrow that enthusiasm gap a little bit, then they might save the House. The question is whether they want to or not. Would you rather have a 3-seat majority in the House or a 6-seat minority? I don't really know, But I think it's a hard election to forecast. There's so many districts in play at the House level, still 100 seats probably. We aren't quite sure how it's going to turn out, that, we're going to be up late counting on November 2nd, and, the night before we're going to have a somewhat better idea, but it's going to be, there should still be a few more twists and turns, I think.
Amy?
I like I like the thought of twists and turns. That means that this campaign will never end. And,
and you'll have a lot to tell to your
I have a lot
Republican
of-
in-laws.
I have
Yes.
a lot of stories to tell. And Nate brings up a very good point. And we saw this in 2006 as well. There are a lot of people who thought they knew exactly what was going to happen. But these things do tend to ebb and flow. I think the enthusiasm gap narrowing will help save some seats. But the real question is where independent voters are. And in so many of these districts, if you're losing independents 60-40, you still can't win, even if you get the Democrats to turn out.
Okay.
For the first time in 4 years, it's great to be a Republican. For a year.
I think it's actually going to be bigger than most people think. I think, you know, at the beginning of the discussions of the Tea Party and their effects, the people were talking about the Tea Parties as AstroTurf, and it was a small group of people who were really pissed off. And we've seen now, since I think pretty credibly through a variety of different polls, that that's simply not the case, that the enthusiasm gap that we had seen has been growing and building on the Republican side. And I don't crunch the numbers like Nate. I'll never be as smart as Nate is. But, you know, I do have a big gut, and I think my gut tells me that this will be bigger than 94. And I don't at all think that the 60-plus numbers on the House side are crazy.
There are enough seats there, but I mean, Democrats did really. I mean, the Tea Party was a leading indicator. You know, back in kind of April of '09, when Obama still had 60% approval ratings, and Democrats really kind of missed it. You know, they kind of dismissed it and made fun of it. And, you know, and there are things about them that you can criticize, of course, right? But you know, it was that day when they had protests in 200 different cities or 500 different cities. I kind of did a piece for 538, which I counted local estimates from local papers of what the turnout had been at these rallies, and they're all tiny, right? They were all like, 500 people or 200 people or 12 people or 1,000 maybe, right? But in some ways, the fact that you had that welling up in so many different places spoke to the fact that it was kind of spontaneous, you know? When Democrats rather have a big 250,000 person rally in Washington or New York or something, and those sometimes don't get noticed as much as they should, but I mean, that was a sign that, people weren't just upset. They were upset enough to go out and interact with their neighbors about it. And I don't know, Democrats should have been. Maybe there's something they could have done, right? But that was a warning sign, I think.
So, okay, my prediction is that we are moving from hope, looking to Washington and looking to politicians and elected officials to solve problems, to looking to communities. So from hope to hope 2.0. And I think the social media and the activity online around that is fascinating and underreported. And the same way that you are saying that we are all kind of taken aback by the Tea Party growing, I think we're all going to be taken aback by how all these disparate little platoons here and there all around the country can coalesce to sort of a big movement that's very American, of sort of people taking matters in their own hands and actually for the good, turning things around, while, of course, we have all the other forces that are more destructive that are not going to be named. But thank you all so much, Stephen, Becky, and Amy, and Nate. And Jonathan, back to you.
I would say thanks, Ariana, since I'm not hooked up to my microphone yet. Hopefully folks at home can hear me. This is why Ariana is so good. She is on it. Thank you all very much. Now they're unhooking you. So go. All right, I'm